My world collapsed with 6 words that struck harder than any blow. Your son is in the ICU. I froze in the middle of O'Hare's arrival terminal, suitcase handle still clutched in my hand, the scent of espresso and croissants from the flight lingering in the air. Just hours earlier, I had been sipping cappuccino along a Venetian canal, laughing quietly to myself as gondolas slid by. I had bought Matthew, my only son, a silk tie from Florence, deep navy, embroidered with delicate golden threads. I imagined him wearing it at his next client meeting, the proud look on his face when I told him it came from Italy. That tie was folded carefully in my luggage, a symbol of my joy, my plans, my hope. Now it felt like a cruel joke. My phone call had come from the ER intake nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Her voice was efficient, detached, as if she hadn't just ripped the ground from beneath my feet. Northwestern Memorial. Intensive care. Car accident. Admitted 6 days ago. 6 days. The words echoed inside me, sharp and merciless. For 6 days, my son had been fighting for his life alone, surrounded by machines, and I had been strolling Parisian streets, photographing the Eiffel Tower, oblivious. For 6 days, Matthew's wife, my daughter-in-law Elise, had not thought to call me. Not one message, not one email, nothing. As I rushed into the hospital's sterile lobby, suitcase wheels rattling across the tile, guilt clawed at my chest so fiercely I could hardly breathe. The scent of disinfectant stung my lungs. The fluorescent lights flickered above, too bright, too cold. I pressed both hands against the counter, knuckles white. I'm Lydia Monroe. My son, Matthew Monroe. I just heard. Please, tell me where he is. The receptionist's eyes softened with recognition. Room 414, ICU. Dr. Patel is his attending physician. A nurse will take you upstairs. Room 414. 6 days. My legs moved without me, carrying me toward the elevators. My mind swirled with a single, unbearable question. Where was Elise? I had left both of them my contact information. Elise had always seemed attentive, always quick to post photos of their perfect life together, brunches, vacations, charity galas. And yet, when Matthew lay broken in a hospital bed, she hadn't reached out. The elevator door slid open, revealing the ICU's quiet hallway. The steady hum of machines, the faint beeping of monitors, filled the silence. A middle-aged nurse named Carla looked up from her computer as I approached. Her kind eyes told me everything her professional tone tried to soften. "We've been trying to reach family," she said gently. "Your son has been critical since admission. His wife was here the first night. She signed the HIPAA consent forms, but she hasn't been back since." Her voice faltered slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe her own words. Neither could I. She hasn't been back? My voice cracked, the words barely escaping my throat. Carla shook her head, her lips pressed into a line. "We've left multiple messages, no response." The floor beneath me tilted. Elise had left Matthew alone, abandoned him. I closed my eyes for a moment, gripping the wall to steady myself. I could almost see the silk tie in my suitcase, folded carefully between sweaters, waiting to be gifted to a son who might never live to wear it. A mother should never discover betrayal and devastation in the same breath. But I did. That night, while Matthew fought for every breath in ICU, Elise was not keeping vigil by his side. She was photographed laughing on the deck of a luxury chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami in Miami, champagne glass in hand. Another man's arm wrapped casually around her waist. I would learn that truth within hours, scrolling through public Instagram stories tagged at Fontainebleau, Miami Beach, the horror sinking deeper with each post. While my son lay intubated, fighting death, his wife was busy living the dream, partying, smiling, pretending she had no obligations. And when I froze the accounts she had been draining, Elise panicked. Her mask cracked. The woman who had ignored calls from doctors suddenly blew up my phone with desperate messages, her carefully constructed life unraveling in real time. But that revelation, that revenge, came later. In that moment, as I stood in the ICU doorway, staring at Matthew's pale, broken body, the truth was already clear. My son was fighting for his life, utterly alone, and the woman who had vowed to love him in sickness and in health had vanished. I felt something ancient rise inside me then. The mother whose child lay helpless. The woman who had once sacrificed everything for her family. The quiet strength of a lifetime stirred awake, and I made a silent vow. Elise had underestimated me. She thought my absence meant freedom, that Matthew's coma meant silence. She was wrong. This was not the end of my son's story, and it was not the end of mine. The doors to the ICU opened with a soft whoosh, like a warning. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as I stepped inside. It felt less like walking into a hospital and more like crossing a threshold I could never return from. The corridor stretched before me, sterile, hushed, lined with rooms where machines hummed louder than voices. Room 414. My son's name printed neatly on a whiteboard outside the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. For one fragile second, I almost couldn't bring myself to push it open. That door was a line in the sand. On one side, the mother who believed her son's life was intact. On the other, the mother who must face what remained after it was nearly destroyed. I pushed it open. The first thing I saw was the ventilator. The rhythmic hiss and whoosh filled the room, unnatural yet steady, like borrowed breath. Tubes snaked into my son's mouth. His chest rose and fell in sync with the machine, not his own will. The steady beeping of the heart monitor pulsed through the air, each note reminding me that he was still here, but only barely. Matthew, my beautiful boy, 32 years old, still young enough that I caught glimpses of the little boy he once was. Now he lay motionless, pale skin bruised with angry purples and deep blues, his right leg suspended in a cast, his left arm hidden beneath bandages. A surgical dressing covered part of his skull, stark against the dark brown hair I used to smooth when he was restless. I stepped closer, my fingers trembling as I reached for his hand. It felt cool, lifeless, nothing like the strong, warm grasp that once lifted boxes when he helped me move, or squeezed mine at his wedding. I wanted to weep. Instead, I swallowed it down. Tears would help no one here. Mrs. Monroe? I turned. A nurse stood by the monitor. A woman in her 50s, gray streaking her blonde hair. Her badge read, Carla Jensen. There was no false cheer in her expression, only the weary compassion of someone who had seen too many parents walk through this same door. Yes. My voice was quiet, but firm. She nodded slightly. Your son was admitted 6 days ago following a severe auto accident. He arrived unconscious and has remained critical since then. We managed to stabilize his vitals after surgery to reduce intracranial pressure, but recovery will be long and uncertain. Her words landed like stones, but the question burning in my chest forced its way out. His wife, Elise, where is she? Carla hesitated. That pause told me everything before she even spoke. She was here briefly the night of admission, Carla said gently. She signed the intake paperwork, but she hasn't returned. We've called her multiple times for medical consent forms, updates, decisions. No response. The room tilted. I gripped the railing of Matthew's bed, willing myself not to collapse. She hasn't been here? My voice cracked. No. Carla's eyes softened, but her tone stayed professional. You should know, Mrs. Monroe. Your son needs an advocate right now, someone to be his voice. I stared at Matthew's face, bruised and swollen beyond recognition. He looked like a stranger wrapped in wires and plaster. Yet he was mine, my son, my only child. I drew in a sharp breath, forcing it past the lump in my throat. Thank you, Carla. I'll be that advocate. The words steadied me. They built a wall against the grief threatening to drown me. I leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair away from Matthew's forehead, careful not to disturb the bandages. My voice was low, meant for him alone. I'm here now. I won't leave you again. The tears pressed harder, but I forced them back. I couldn't break here, not when he needed me strong. So I stood by his side, hand in his, swallowing the grief whole. Because I knew in that moment I wasn't allowed to fall apart. Later that evening, a uniformed officer appeared at the doorway of Matthew's room. His name tag read Ruiz. He carried the solemn air of someone used to delivering grim truths. Mrs. Monroe, he said quietly, I was the first responder at your son's accident. I thought you should know the details. I stood, bracing myself. Please, tell me. Your son was a passenger. His wife, Elise, was driving. The car lost control at high speed and struck the divider. Matthew wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He suffered the worst of the injuries. Elise walked away with nothing more than scratches. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. Where is she now? His jaw tightened. She left the emergency department that same night, signed the admission forms, then disappeared. We tried contacting her for follow-up questions, but she hasn't returned our calls. The words fell heavy in the sterile room. Elise, uninjured, free to leave. Elise, vanishing into the night while her husband lay broken and unconscious. I sank slowly back into the chair beside Matthew's bed. My son's monitors beeped in steady rhythm, filling the silence State Trooper Ruiz left behind. If you were me, what would you feel? Could you forgive a woman who abandoned your child, her husband, while machines forced air into his lungs? Could you accept silence from the person who should have been holding his hand, not walking away? The question lodged itself in my heart, not just for me, but for anyone listening. Forgiveness is noble, they say. But what about betrayal so deep it leaves someone gasping for life alone? I looked at Matthew. My hand closed gently around his fingers, bruised and limp. My voice trembled, but I leaned close, whispering into the sterile air between us. I will find out the truth, Matthew, about the crash, about Elise, about why you were left alone. I promise you this. The ventilator whooshed, the monitor beeped, and the shadows lengthened across the room. I pressed my lips to his temple, careful of the bandages. You will never be abandoned again, not while I am here. By the second night at the hospital, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. My body begged for sleep, but my mind refused to rest. Each beep of the monitor tethered me to Matthew, but it also reminded me of Elise's absence. She had vanished as if marriage were nothing more than a contract she could shred when inconvenient. I needed answers. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. Years in finance had taught me one thing above all else: people leave trails. If Elise had abandoned her husband, she had left tracks somewhere. I logged into the joint checking account at Chase I had set up for Matthew and Elise as a wedding gift. It was supposed to be their safety net, a small cushion for emergencies, something I had thought would give them peace of mind. The page loaded slowly, the hospital Wi-Fi sluggish. My breath caught when the American Express Platinum charges and Wells Fargo withdrawals appeared. The list stretched down the screen like a confession. 6 days ago, the day after the accident, the first withdrawal appeared: $2,000 in cash from an Wells Fargo ATM in Miami. Then another, and another. Hotel charges from an oceanfront property. Thousands of dollars in restaurant bills. A charge for a luxury chartered yacht off South Beach. Miami charter. Seize the day. Designer boutiques. Champagne. The total stacked relentlessly. More than $15,000 in less than a week. I pressed my hand against my chest, steadying my breath. While Matthew lay motionless, stitched and broken, Elise was in Miami spending money meant for emergencies. Our money. Scrolling further, I saw something worse. The charges were current. Just hours earlier, Elise had enjoyed dinner for 4 at a restaurant where the bill surpassed $1,000. Photos began to surface in my mind. Elise on the deck of a chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami. Elise laughing with a man who was not my son. Elise holding a flute of champagne as if the accident had never happened. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted to act quickly: Harold Chen, my longtime private client banker at Chase Bank. He had guided me through years of investments, a man whose integrity had never wavered. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, familiar. "Mrs. Monroe, it's good to hear from you. I hope your trip was—" "Harold." I cut him off, my tone sharper than I intended. "This is an emergency. I need you to listen carefully." His voice shifted instantly to professional concern. "Of course. What's happened?" "My son, Matthew, is in intensive care. His wife, Elise, was driving when the accident occurred. She walked away with scratches and has since disappeared. Tonight, I discovered she's been draining their joint checking account at Chase, spending thousands in Miami on hotels, chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami's, and God knows what else. I need every account she has access to frozen, immediately." There was silence for half a second, then the rapid clicking of keys on his end. "Understood. Give me the account number." I rattled it off, my voice firm despite the storm inside me. "Mrs. Monroe," Harold said carefully, "I can confirm multiple American Express Platinum charges and Wells Fargo withdrawals from Miami. Luxury expenditures, all recent. We can enact emergency security protocols. Her cards will be declined with the next attempt." Relief mingled with cold fury in my chest. "Do it. Shut it down. And Harold, notify me of every attempt she makes. I want a record, time-stamped. If she tries to run, I want to know." "You'll have it," he assured me. "And Lydia, I'm sorry. Truly." I ended the call, staring at the glow of the laptop screen. The scrolling American Express Platinum charges and Wells Fargo withdrawals were more than numbers. They were proof. Elise hadn't just abandoned my son. She had exploited him. She had left him for dead while she funded her own pleasure. I leaned back in the stiff hospital chair, the ventilator's rhythmic hiss filling the silence. My hand brushed against Matthew's, still cold beneath the thin blanket. Elise thinks she's untouchable, I whispered, my voice low but steady. But she doesn't know me. She doesn't know what I will do to protect you. For 30 years, I had been underestimated by colleagues who thought kindness meant weakness, by neighbors who assumed my silence meant consent. I had raised Matthew with patience, with decency, with integrity. But tonight, a different strength stirred. Not loud, not violent, silent, surgical. The strength that knows when to cut clean and when to wait. Paperwork justice. Freezing her accounts was only the beginning. She would feel the absence of money the way Matthew felt the absence of her hand by his bedside. Every decline at an Wells Fargo ATM, every rejected hotel charge, every awkward moment when a credit card was refused would be a message delivered without words. You are not welcome to profit from our pain. I closed the laptop and rested my forehead briefly against Matthew's arm. Rest now, my son, I murmured. I will watch. I will fight in my way, and you will never be left defenseless again. The beeping monitor echoed in steady rhythm, each sound a vow. Elise had left her trail in ink and receipts. I had found it, and now I was following it, step by step, until the truth was undeniable. After Harold froze the accounts, I thought I might finally rest. But rest never came. The hospital room was too quiet, my mind too loud. My laptop screen still glowed beside me, casting pale light across Matthew's still body. Numbers alone weren't enough. I needed to see. I opened a browser and typed Elise's name. Her account was private, of course, but Elise had never been discreet about her circle of friends. I tried a few of their names, one after another, and then I found it. The first photo appeared like a slap across the face. Elise stood on the deck of a chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami, the Miami coastline behind her, sunlight bouncing off the water. She wore a white sundress that whipped in the wind, a glass of champagne raised high, her smile wide and carefree. But it wasn't her smile that made my stomach twist. It was the bracelet around her wrist, thin silver links set with small sapphire stones. I had given it to her the day she married my son. A welcome to the family gift, chosen carefully in Florence, where I had found it in a shop filled with handmade jewelry. I had said, "May this always remind you of the promise you've made, the bond you share." She had clasped it on her wrist that day, tears in her eyes. Now it gleamed in the Florida sun, a badge of betrayal. Scrolling further, my hands shook. In another picture, Elise leaned against a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, tanned, hair slicked back, a predator's grin plastered across his face. His arm wrapped around her waist as though she had always been his. The caption read, "Living the dream." 3 days in, no signs of stopping. 3 days. The same 3 days my son's life had hung in balance. Another photo. Elise laughing into the camera, head thrown back, champagne spilling dangerously close to the deck. The man kissed her cheek, and there, on her left hand, my son's wedding band caught the sun. The ring Matthew had saved for, worked double shifts for, chosen with so much care it made him nervous to show me. She wore it like a trinket, decoration for a party, while the man who placed it there lay broken in a hospital bed. My breath came shallow, uneven. I clicked again and again, punishing myself with each new image. Elise draped in designer clothes, lounging across white leather cushions, diamond earrings glinting. Elise feeding the man a strawberry. Elise dancing barefoot on polished wood, hair loose, eyes shining with a joy she had never shown Matthew in public. Each picture was a knife, not just because of her absence, but because of what she chose instead. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't even pretending. She was celebrating. I stopped on one image longer than the rest. Elise stood at the railing, the horizon stretching endlessly behind her. The bracelet still circled her wrist, but her other hand rested on the man's chest. And on that hand, the ring, the symbol of my son's love, of his trust. The ventilator's hiss filled the silence as I stared at the screen. Matthew's chest rose and fell, steady only because of the machine. My son had given Elise everything, and she had given nothing back except betrayal. I whispered into the room, my voice breaking. How do I tell him, when he wakes, that this is who she really was? The question lingered in the sterile air, heavier than any answer. Forgiveness, loyalty, vows, all words shattered by those images. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection faint in the dark screen. My eyes looked older, sharper, as if the truth itself had carved lines across my face. Elise thought her party was hidden, shielded by distance and luxury. But she had left a trail brighter than neon. Photos, captions, jewelry, symbols she could never erase. I reached for Matthew's hand, wrapping my fingers around his bruised knuckles. "You are not alone, my son," I whispered. "Not now, not ever. And when you wake, you will know the truth. But you will also know that you are loved." The beeping monitor answered for him, steady and unyielding. Outside, the night pressed against the hospital windows. Inside, I made my vow. Elise had chosen her stage. She had revealed her mask. Now, it was my turn to play mine. The photos still burned behind my eyelids long after I shut the laptop. Elise laughing, Elise raising her glass, Elise leaning into another man's arms while my son lay fighting for his life. The cruelty of it all pressed down until I could barely breathe. And then, without warning, another image surfaced, one from years earlier. It was Matthew's wedding day. I could see it as clearly as if I were standing in that church again. The air was heavy with lilies, my son's nervous energy almost visible. He had never looked more alive than when Elise walked down the aisle. Her dress shimmered in the soft light, her hair pinned simply but elegantly. She smiled at him, a smile I had convinced myself was full of love. I remembered the way Matthew's hands shook when he slid the ring onto her finger. He whispered something only she could hear, and she nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. The guests sighed. I cried too, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude that my son had found someone to cherish him. At the reception, Elise had taken my hands in hers. "Thank you for welcoming me into your family, Mrs. Monroe," she had said with such tenderness. "I promise you, I will take care of him. Always." Her voice trembled, her eyes glassy with emotion. I had believed her. Now, sitting in the harsh glow of hospital machines, that promise rang hollow. The woman who had sworn to care for him forever was now draped across a chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami, her champagne glass catching the same sunlight that once reflected on her wedding band. The beeping monitor in Matthew's room pulled me back to the present. I looked at his swollen face, the tubes that kept him alive, the cast immobilizing his arm. He had trusted Elise with his life. She had taken that trust and turned it into currency for her own indulgence. The flashback returned, unrelenting. Elise dancing with Matthew, her head resting on his shoulder during their first dance. The guests had circled the floor, clapping and cheering. Matthew whispered in my ear later, "She's everything I ever hoped for, Mom. I can feel it. This is the start of something beautiful." I had smiled at him, believing in her softness, her grace, her vows. I had seen what I wanted to see, what he wanted me to see. But now, with each cruel photo, the illusion shattered. I pressed my forehead into my palm, the contrast too painful to ignore. Wedding vows against hospital monitors, champagne glasses against fourth lines, a silver bracelet, once a symbol of welcome, now the very proof of betrayal. Time folded on itself, past and present colliding. The aisle where Elise had walked so gracefully became the hallway where she had walked away from her husband's bedside. Her whispered promises turned into silence, her tender smile into laughter shared with another man. I turned to Matthew, my voice a low murmur. "I was there that day, watching you believe in forever. I wanted to believe, too. But love without loyalty isn't love, and promises without action are lies." The ventilator hissed, keeping him tethered to this world. My hand covered his. "You gave her everything, Matthew, and she gave you nothing but absence. But I will not abandon you. Not now. Not ever." The flashback receded, leaving me raw, hollow. Yet something steadier remained underneath. A vow of my own. Elise had broken every promise she ever made, but I would keep mine. I was still sitting beside Matthew when the knock came at the door. It was soft, almost respectful, the kind of knock that warned me bad news was waiting on the other side. I rose, smoothing the wrinkles in my blouse, and stepped into the hallway. Detective Ruiz stood there, hat in his hand. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that came from too many late nights and too many tragedies. We had met briefly when Matthew was first admitted, but tonight his presence carried a heavier weight. "Mrs. Monroe," he began, his voice steady but low. "May I speak with you privately?" I nodded, leading him to a small consultation room down the hall. The walls were the color of old parchment, the lighting harsh, but at least it offered some measure of privacy. Ruiz remained standing, as though sitting would soften what he had to say. "There are details from the crash I need you to know," he said. "We've completed a preliminary review of the evidence. It paints a clearer picture of what happened that night." I folded my arms, bracing myself. "Go on." He hesitated, just long enough to make my stomach tighten. "Elise was behind the wheel. Witnesses saw her leaving the bar with your son. Surveillance cameras confirm she was drinking, several glasses of wine, possibly more. Blood tests at admission show her alcohol level was over the legal limit." My chest constricted. Elise had been drunk, reckless, and Matthew had paid the price. But Ruiz wasn't finished. He opened a folder, sliding several papers across the table. Phone records show Elise was texting in the moments leading up to the crash. Her last message was sent less than 30 seconds before the vehicle hit the divider. That combination, alcohol, speed, and distraction, made the collision almost inevitable. I pressed my lips together to keep from crying out. Images flashed through my mind. Elise at the wedding, swearing she would always protect Matthew. Elise raising a glass of champagne on a chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami, while my son's chest rose only because of machines. And now this. Proof that she hadn't even been looking at the road when his life splintered into pieces. Ruiz's voice softened. "Mrs. Monroe, I know this is hard to hear, but there's more. We found documents in Elise's car, insurance paperwork, life insurance policies filed just weeks before the accident. She had contacted the agency about potential payout timelines. The room tilted. I gripped the table edge, my knuckles white. She filed for insurance? Before my son was even out of surgery? He nodded grimly. She called the MetLife claims adjuster within 24 hours, asking about coverage, asking how soon funds could be released in the event of loss. My heart cracked with a soundless fracture. Elise hadn't just walked away. She had calculated. She had treated Matthew's life as a commodity, a line item to be cashed in. "Detective," I whispered, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "Are you saying she married him for money? That my son was nothing more than a wallet to her?" Ruiz didn't answer directly. His silence was confirmation enough. Instead, he placed a hand on the folder. "What I can tell you is this. The evidence points to reckless endangerment at best, and possibly intentional negligence. Whether it rises to criminal intent will depend on what else we uncover. But yes, financial motives are being investigated." I sat back, my breath shallow. Matthew's entire future, everything he dreamed of, his music, his family, his simple wish for a life of love, reduced to numbers in an insurance form. Elise hadn't just betrayed him. She had commodified him. I stared at the papers Ruiz had left on the table. Cold, clinical printouts, transaction logs, text records, policy numbers, proof of Elise's betrayal, laid bare in black and white. My mind drifted back to the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one I had chosen with love in Florence. She had worn it at the wedding, at the party, and during the crash. A symbol of belonging twisted into a symbol of exploitation. I whispered to myself, too quiet for Ruiz to hear. She never loved him. She loved what he could give her. Ruiz cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Monroe, I need you to prepare yourself. Elise will likely face questioning soon. If she returns, or if she tries to contact you, please let me know immediately. We need her cooperation, or, at the very least, her presence." I nodded, though my focus was still on Matthew. "You'll find her," I said. "But more importantly, I will not let her take another breath from his life. Not one." Ruiz met my gaze. There was no pity there, only respect. He tipped his hat and left me alone in the sterile room. I lingered a moment, staring at the folder, before returning to Matthew's bedside. The sight of him, the bandages, the machines, felt heavier now. Every injury, every bruise, no longer just the result of chance, but perhaps of design. I took his hand in mine and whispered, "Did she ever see you as more than a bank account, my son? Did she ever love you at all?" My tears fell silently, but my grip tightened with resolve. She may have seen Matthew as a wallet, but I saw him as everything. And that was why I would not stop until the truth was carved into the record for all to see. The nights in the ICU had a way of stretching longer than any I had known before. Even when the clock said midnight, the fluorescent lights made it feel like time itself had frozen. Nurses moved quietly, machines beeped steadily, and every breath my son took came from a ventilator's rhythm. It was on one of those endless nights that I noticed him. An older man sat across the hall in his own room, propped up on a hospital bed. He was thin, with a shock of white hair and skin as pale as the sheets. But his eyes were awake, alert, watching the corridor with a quiet patience. We crossed paths in the lounge the next morning. He sat in a wheelchair near the window, the rising sun turning his silver hair to gold. I offered a polite smile, expecting nothing more than courtesy. Instead, he spoke first. "You're Matthew's mother, aren't you?" His voice was gravelly but kind. I nodded. "Yes, Lydia Monroe." "Walter Harris," he introduced himself, extending a frail but steady hand. "Room 418. Been here longer than I care to count." I sat beside him, drawn by something in his calm presence. "How long?" I asked gently. 3 months, he answered, glancing at the IV pole that trailed beside him like a shadow. "My heart's weak. They keep patching me up, but—" He gave a small shrug. "Time has its own plans." I didn't know what to say, so I simply listened. "My wife, Eleanor, passed 10 years ago," Walter continued. "My kids, well, let's just say they moved on. I get a card on Christmas. Maybe a call on my birthday. Most days it's just me." His words carried no bitterness, only a matter-of-fact acceptance that made my chest ache. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He shook his head. "Don't be. Regret wastes the little strength I have left. Besides, I've learned something in this place." His gaze drifted toward the hallway, then back to me. When you lose almost everything, your health, your partner, even your family, there's still one thing worth holding on to. "What's that?" I asked, though I already felt the answer in my bones. "Dignity," he said simply. "Sometimes it's the only thing left. And if you can keep it, no one has really taken your life from you." The words settled deep inside me, as though he had reached directly into my chest and touched the rawest part of my grief. Elise's betrayal, Matthew's suffering, my own helpless guilt. They had stripped away so much. But dignity, that was still mine to guard. And it was Matthew's to reclaim once he woke. I looked at Walter, seeing in him not just a lonely man, but a mirror, someone discarded by those who should have loved him most, yet still clinging to the one truth no one could erase. He gave me a small smile. "Your son, he's lucky. He may not know it now, but he'll wake up to find his mother still here. That matters more than you think." I reached over, covering his frail hand with mine. "And you're not as alone as you think either, Walter." For the first time in days, I felt the corners of my mouth lift in something close to a smile. His reflection of my own struggle gave me strength. Dignity. Yes. That, at least, Elise could never take from us. It was the 3rd morning since I had returned from Europe when Elise finally showed her face. I was standing at the nurse's station reviewing Matthew's chart with Carla when the click of high heels echoed down the hallway. The sound was so jarring in that sterile corridor that every head turned. There she was, Elise Monroe, my daughter-in-law, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, as if she were arriving for a luncheon rather than visiting her husband in intensive care. She carried a leather handbag tucked under her arm and a folder of papers clutched too tightly in her hand. "Mrs. Monroe," Carla greeted carefully, her professional tone hiding the edge beneath. Elise ignored her, eyes sweeping past me toward the nurse manager's desk. "I am here for the MetLife claim forms," she said crisply. "I need to finalize some paperwork on Matthew's policy." The words sliced through me. Not "how is he?" Not "can I see him?" Only MetLife claim forms. I stepped forward before Carla could respond. "Elise," my voice was low, steady, though I felt the burn of fury in my chest. "Matthew is in room 412, unconscious, breathing through machines. And the first words out of your mouth are about money?" She blinked, then lifted her chin, her expression smooth. Someone has to be responsible, Lydia. Do you know how expensive this will all be? The doctors, the surgery, the rehab, if he even makes it that far. The policy exists for a reason. I'm just doing what Matthew would want. Matthew would want you by his side, I said quietly. Not in line at the hospital billing office. Her lips curled into a half smile, the kind that carried no warmth. Not all of us have the luxury of standing vigil all day. Some of us have to think about the future. The silence that followed was suffocating. I refused to raise my voice. Instead, I let my eyes rest on hers, unwavering, implacable. She shifted slightly under the weight of it, though her mask did not slip. At that moment, Detective Ruiz appeared from around the corner. He had been following up on Matthew's case, and his timing could not have been more precise. "Mrs. Elise Monroe," he said, his voice clipped, professional. "We need to talk." Her head snapped toward him. "Detective, I know exactly what you were just doing," Ruiz cut in. He gestured to the folder in her hand. "Attempting to initiate a claim on a policy while your husband is still alive. That's unusual behavior." Elise's face flushed, the first crack in her polished composure. "I was only trying to make sure things were in order. Hospitals cost money. You can't expect me to shoulder that alone." I spoke then, my tone measured but unyielding. "No one asked you to shoulder anything. The doctors asked only that you stay, that you advocate for your husband. And you vanished. 6 days, Elise. 6 days he lay here, and you were nowhere." Her gaze flickered, just for an instant, betraying guilt, or perhaps annoyance at being cornered. I had to get away. I was traumatized too. Ruiz folded his arms. Traumatized people usually don't rent chartered yacht off South Beach. Miami's in Miami. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to protest, but Ruiz raised a hand. "Save it. We'll go over your activities later. For now, I need you to leave this floor. You're not to sign anything, not to touch any financial documents until further notice." She turned to me then, eyes flashing. "You think you can cut me out of this? I'm his wife. That money is as much mine as his." I felt something ancient stir within me, the same force that had carried me through widowhood, through raising Matthew alone, through every quiet sacrifice. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Marriage may have given you his name, Elise, but it did not give you his soul. That still belongs to him. And while he fights for his life, you will not treat him like a bank account." For once, Elise had no answer. The silence pressed down on her, on all of us. She shifted uncomfortably, then snapped her folder shut. "This isn't over," she hissed, before Ruiz guided her firmly down the hall. I stood frozen, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, so wrong in a place filled with antiseptic and grief. Slowly, I returned to Matthew's bedside. He hadn't moved, hadn't stirred, but I leaned close, pressing my forehead gently to his hand. "She came," I whispered, "but not for you. Not the way she should have. Don't worry, Matthew. She won't touch another piece of your life without going through me first." The monitor beeped steadily, its rhythm now matching my resolve. Elise had tried to turn my son into a paycheck, but I would turn her every attempt into evidence. And when the time came, she would realize that dignity, his, mine, and ours, was something she could never buy. That night, after Elise had been escorted out, The hospital quieted into its strange rhythm again. The ventilator whooshed, monitors pulsed, and the occasional squeak of rubber soles echoed down the corridor. I sat by Matthew's bed, exhaustion weighing heavy, but my mind refused to rest. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small leather journal, one I had carried for years. The pages were filled with lists, stray thoughts, prayers I never spoke aloud. Tonight, though, I opened to a blank page and began to write. My dearest Robert. The pen felt awkward in my hand at first, but the words spilled faster than I expected. If you could see us now, you would know why I came back early. I thought I was surprising our boy with chocolates from Paris, a silk tie from Florence. Instead, I walked into a nightmare. 6 days, Robert. 6 days he lay here, machines keeping him alive, and I was wandering foreign streets as if the world had not changed. My throat tightened as I wrote, but I forced myself to continue. Elise was here when he was admitted. She signed the C papers, then left, just walked out. Ruiz tells me she was barely scratched. She could have stayed. She could have held his hand. Instead, she vanished. And now she returns, not to comfort him, but to sign MetLife claim forms. I wish I could say I was surprised. You always said she wanted security more than love. I wanted to believe you were wrong. I paused, staring at the curve of Matthew's nose, the bandages on his brow, the slight rise and fall of his chest. Do you know what haunts me most? The thought that maybe she only ever saw him as a wallet, that she said, I do not, because she loved our son, but because she loved the life he could provide. And I welcomed her in. I bought the dress, set the flowers, gave her my mother's bracelet to wear. I thought I was helping Matthew build a future. Now all I see is betrayal. My hand trembled as I underlined the next words. If you were here, you would tell me to stay strong. You would remind me that Matthew needs a mother who does not fall apart. So I swallow my tears. Robert, I swallow them whole because I cannot let him see me break. I promised him tonight he would never be abandoned again. And I meant every syllable. I closed my eyes, letting the ink dry. Then I added the final lines. I miss you more than I can write, but maybe somehow you are here in this room. If so, give our boy the strength to fight his way back, and give me the strength to stand guard until he does. I signed only with my initials, LM, then set the pen down. Carefully, I tore the page from the journal, folded it twice, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my handbag. I would not send it. No one would ever read it. But knowing it was there, my truth on paper, steadied me, like an anchor dropped into dark waters, keeping me from drifting too far into despair. I tucked the journal away, reached for Matthew's hand, and whispered softly, Your father would have been proud of you, and he would have told me what I already know. I will not let her win. The monitor beeped its steady reply. The unsent letter rested against my side, silent but unyielding, a witness to a promise I intended to keep. The next morning, I was still sitting by Matthew's bed when my phone buzzed with a secure message from Harold Chen. Harold had been my private client banker at Chase Bank for more than 2 decades, a man who spoke in numbers the way others spoke in poetry. I opened the file he sent and felt my stomach twist as the truth spread across the screen. Every transaction told a story, and the story was Elise. There were transfers, small at first, then growing bold, into an account I didn't recognize. The name attached was Daniel Pierce, a man whose identity Harold had quickly traced. Miami address, no known employment. Social media littered with chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami's, champagne, and a smile that looked practiced in every mirror of every nightclub. Harold's note was clipped, professional but heavy, with implication: your daughter-in-law has been funneling funds to this man for months, nearly $40,000 in total. The activity accelerated in the days following Matthew's accident. I scrolled further. Designer purchases, cash withdrawals, resort payments in Daniel's city, all in Elise's handwriting, her signature clear as daylight. The paper trail didn't just whisper betrayal, it screamed. I thought back to her wedding vows, her trembling voice as she promised to cherish Matthew, in sickness and in health. I had believed her then. I had wanted to. But now, staring at these numbers, I realized she had been writing her own vows elsewhere, in digits and decimals, addressed not to my son, but to another man. The weight of it pressed down on me until my hands shook. I set the phone on my lap, closed my eyes, and breathed slowly, counting each inhale the way Robert used to remind me when panic rose too fast. When I opened my eyes, the document still glared back, undeniable. I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, "Paper never lies." Carla passed by just then, pausing to check Matthew's IV line. She glanced at me, at the phone in my hands, and though I said nothing, she seemed to understand. "Sometimes the truth comes dressed in paperwork," she murmured before moving on. Her words landed like a confirmation, a mirror to my own thoughts. I picked up the phone again and saved Harold's report into a separate encrypted folder. I knew then that Elise wasn't just careless, wasn't just selfish. She was deliberate. She had built her escape plan with my son's money, piece by piece, transaction by transaction, until betrayal became her lifestyle. My eyes drifted back to Matthew. He looked so young lying there, so defenseless, his life reduced to monitors and machines. I brushed his hand gently and whispered, "Don't worry, my love. I have the proof now. She can't hide behind pretty words or painted smiles anymore. The paper shows who she really is." I slipped the phone back into my handbag, next to the folded letter I had written to Robert. Two truths sat side by side, one inked in my own hand, the other stamped in financial records. Together, they would be my weapons. Quiet, steady, undeniable. The ICU was colder at night, not in temperature, but in spirit. The hum of machines grew louder when the hallways emptied, when visitors went home and nurses walked in softer steps. I sat in the chair by Matthew's bed, my hands folded around his, and the silence pressed in like a weight. I studied his face, half hidden by bandages, swollen in places where glass had cut, pale where color should have been. His chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of the ventilator, a rhythm I hated and clung to at the same time. Leaning forward, I whispered, "Do you remember the day you first tried to walk, Matthew?" My throat tightened as I spoke, but I let the memory come. You were 9 months old, a stubborn little thing. You pulled yourself up by the coffee table, wobbled like a sailor on rough seas, and then you let go. Your first step was crooked, your second a stumble, but you didn't cry. You laughed, and I was waiting with open arms, ready to catch you if you fell. I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, careful not to disturb the bandages. Now here we are again. You're fighting to move, to breathe, to wake. And just like then, I'm waiting, arms open. This time I won't just catch you. I'll stand guard until you can walk on your own again." My words cracked, but I pressed on. "Do you hear me, sweetheart? You are not alone. You will never be alone. Not while I have breath in my body." The monitor beeped softly, steady but impersonal, as though mocking the intimacy of my promise. I squeezed his hand tighter, letting my tears fall freely for once. I had been swallowing them all week, saving my strength for paperwork, for detectives, for Elise's schemes. But here, in the dark, it felt safe to let them flow. "I wish your father were here," I murmured. "He would have known what to say. He always believed in you, in your strength. And he would have told me what I already know, that this isn't the end. It's only another step, shaky and small, but the beginning of walking again." I closed my eyes, breathing in the antiseptic air. I thought of the letter folded in my handbag, unsent, heavy with truths I could not share. I thought of Harold's report, Elise's betrayal written in black and white, and I thought of the photographs I had seen, Elise laughing with another man while Matthew lay here tethered to machines. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I whispered. "It's not her lies. It's the thought that you believed her, that you gave her your heart, your trust, and she traded it for champagne and chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami parties. But listen to me, Matthew. What she broke, I will help you rebuild. What she abandoned, I will guard. You are my son, my only son, and no betrayal can change that." I paused, letting the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel the weight of every word, even if he could not respond. Then I whispered the line I had been holding back, the one that rose like a prayer from the deepest part of me. "The first time you walked, you wobbled into my arms. This time, when you take your first steps again, I'll be here waiting, arms wide open, just like before." For a moment, I thought I felt the faintest squeeze of his fingers. Maybe it was a reflex. Maybe it was nothing. But I chose to believe it was a sign, a whisper back from wherever his mind wandered. I leaned down, pressing my forehead gently against his hand. "Come back to me, Matthew. Take that step. I'll catch you if you fall." The machines kept their steady rhythm, indifferent to hope. But in my heart, I felt something shift. The slow dawn of resolve. The understanding that love was not passive. Love was vigilant. And mine was strong enough to anchor him until he found his way back. The call came just after midnight. My phone lit up with her name, Elise. For a long moment, I let it ring, watching her letters flash across the screen like a bad omen. Finally, I swiped to answer. Her voice was frantic, high-pitched, on the edge of hysteria. "Lydia, what did you do? My cards aren't working. The hotel front desk is demanding another payment, and the chartered yacht off South Beach Miami company is threatening to call the police if I don't settle the balance tonight." I held the phone loosely, letting her panic spill into the silence between us. She filled it quickly. "You have to fix this. You know these accounts are ours. Matthew would want me taken care of. You can't just cut me off. I'm his wife. I'm entitled to everything. Do you hear me? Everything." Her words tumbled over each other, shifting from desperation to entitlement, like waves colliding against rocks. I finally spoke, my tone even, steady, almost soft. "You had access, and you used it for champagne and chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami's, while my son lay in a hospital bed, fighting for his life." Her breath caught, but only for a second. I was coping, I needed space to deal with the trauma. You don't understand what I went through that night. I closed my eyes, picturing Matthew's bruised face under the harsh ICU lights. I understand perfectly. You walked away with scratches. He was broken and left behind, and then you abandoned him again. The line went silent for a heartbeat before she shifted tactics. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. Listen to me, Lydia. If you don't restore those accounts, I'll tell everyone you're trying to control me, that you're stealing from me. I'll go to the press, to the police. You'll regret this. Her threats rolled over me like cold wind. I had heard worse in boardrooms, from men twice her size who underestimated me. I stayed quiet, letting her anger burn itself out. Say something, she demanded, her voice cracking now, the hysteria breaking through again. You can't just sit there and do nothing. I let the silence stretch, a deliberate pause that cut sharper than any reply. Then, with calm finality, I said, "The only thing my son ever needed from you was your presence, and when it mattered most, you chose to give him nothing." She gasped, as if the truth itself had struck her, but I didn't wait for her response. I ended the call and set the phone down beside Matthew's bed. The machines hummed steadily, their rhythm grounding me. For a long time, I sat in the quiet, staring at my son's hand in mine. Elise's voice still rang in my ears, but I refused to let it linger. Her panic was hers to carry now, not mine. I had shifted the balance. The accounts were frozen, her lifeline severed, and for the first time, I felt the scale tilt back toward justice. I whispered to Matthew, my voice gentle. She can scream, she can threaten, but she can't take from you anymore. Not your money, not your dignity, not your fight to live. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to exhale. The next afternoon, I was standing just outside Matthew's room when I heard the sharp click of heels against the hospital tile. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Elise. She came toward me in a whirlwind, hair disheveled, sunglasses shoved up onto her head, mascara smeared like bruises under her eyes. She looked less like a grieving wife and more like a cornered animal. "Lydia," she said, her voice trembling before breaking into a shrill cry. "You can't do this to me. I can't live like this. They're freezing me out. My cards, the hotel, even the boutique. Everyone's looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal. You have to fix it. Please." Her words bounced off the sterile walls, loud enough for nurses to glance over before quickly turning away. Elise fell to her knees right there in the hallway, grabbing at the hem of my coat. "I swear I'll do better. I'll stay with Matthew every night. I'll pray beside him. Just give me one card back. Just one." I looked down at her, and for a moment, I almost saw the young woman Matthew had fallen for, the poised bride in white silk, the soft voice that once promised forever. But the illusion shattered the second she raised her face to mine. Her eyes weren't filled with love or guilt. They were wild with hunger. "Get up," I said quietly. My voice was calm, even, but it cut through her pleas sharper than any shout. She scrambled to her feet, switching tactics instantly, her tears drying into anger. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Controlling everything, taking what's mine. Matthew is my husband. That money is ours. You don't get to decide who I am or what I deserve." I met her glare with steady eyes. "You're right about one thing. Matthew is your husband, and yet he lies in there, fighting for breath, while you were pouring champagne on a chartered yacht off South Beach, Miami. I don't need to decide who you are, Elise. You already did that yourself. Her face flushed, blotchy with rage. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Careful, Lydia. I can ruin you. I can tell everyone you manipulated me, that you're the reason Matthew is like this. People will believe me. I straightened my shoulders, meeting her venom with silence. She waited, expecting me to falter, to defend myself. But I didn't. I simply stood still, my expression unchanging. The quiet was unbearable to her. Finally, I spoke, each word deliberate, slow. The only thing Matthew ever needed from you was to stay, and when it mattered most, you chose to leave. For a moment, she froze, the words landing heavier than any accusation. Then she laughed bitterly, a sharp, broken sound. You think you've won, don't you? You think freezing my cards makes you the hero. You'll see, Lydia. You'll regret underestimating me. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Power had shifted, and she felt it. Her threats, once sharp, now sounded hollow, like a performance played too many times. Behind me, Carla Jensen, the night nurse who had been caring for Matthew since the day of admission, stepped quietly into the hallway. She paused, her gaze moving from Elise's trembling hands to my stillness. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told me everything: respect, solidarity, even admiration. She had seen Elise vanish, seen me sit vigil every night. She knew the truth without needing confirmation. Elise noticed Carla watching and tried to salvage her dignity, brushing her hair back with a trembling hand. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice cracking. "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." Carla's voice, firm but measured, broke the tension. "Mrs. Harrison, you need to leave now. This is a hospital, not a stage." For the first time since I had met her, Elise looked small, stripped of excuses, stripped of money, stripped even of the performance that once dazzled Matthew. She turned on her heel, her heels clicking furiously against the floor as she stormed down the corridor. I didn't move until the sound faded into silence. Only then did I exhale, my hand brushing against the silk tie I still carried in my pocket, the one I had bought in Florence for Matthew, my emotional anchor. Carla stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You don't raise your voice, you don't shout, but you fight harder than anyone I've ever seen." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment I felt the sting of tears. Not from weakness, but from recognition. Someone had witnessed the quiet war I was waging. "Sometimes," I said softly, "the loudest fight is the one fought in silence." Carla nodded, her expression warm. Then she slipped back into Matthew's room, leaving me alone in the hallway where Elise's shadow had just lingered. I stood there a moment longer, letting the stillness settle. Elise could scream, threaten, and claw, but she no longer held the power. That belonged to me now, to the mother who refused to abandon her son, and no amount of noise from her could change that. 2 days after Elise's outburst in the hallway, Detective Ruiz returned to the hospital. His expression was more resolute than I had ever seen it. He carried a folder tucked under his arm, thick with papers, and his tone left no room for doubt. "Mrs. Monroe," he began, standing just outside Matthew's room, "we've gathered enough evidence to proceed. Elise Thompson will be formally charged. Driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, financial exploitation." The words rang in my ears like a gavel striking. For weeks, I had been gathering fragments, bank statements, photographs, whispered confessions. Now those fragments were being shaped into something solid. Justice. I asked quietly, "What happens now?" Ruiz's eyes softened, though his voice stayed firm. "We'll serve the warrant today. She'll be arrested and questioned. The insurance angle, the secret accounts, the reckless driving, all of it will be presented. It's unlikely she understands how deep this has already gone." As if on cue, a commotion rose from the lobby below. Shouts, heels striking tile, and then Elise's voice, unmistakable even from a distance. "You can't do this to me! I'm his wife!" Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers escorted her up the stairs. She looked wild, hair falling loose, jacket slipping from one shoulder, eyes blazing with desperation. When she saw me, she lunged forward, only to be restrained by the officers holding her arms. "This is your fault," she screamed. "You turned everyone against me. I was supposed to have control, do you understand? He's my husband. That money, that insurance, it was mine. You ruined everything." Her words sliced through the air, raw and frantic, but Ruiz didn't flinch. He read the charges aloud, his voice steady over her shrill protests. "Elise Thompson, you are under arrest for driving under the influence, reckless endangerment resulting in critical injury, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Elise twisted violently, her voice breaking into a sob. "No, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was just one mistake. He was supposed to be fine. Matthew was supposed to be fine." I stood there, silent, my hands folded tightly in front of me. Inside, my heart clenched at the sound of her panic, but not from sympathy. It was the hollow wail of someone watching her illusions collapse and knowing there was no one left to blame but herself. She tried one last time, her voice cracking as she looked at me directly. "Lydia, please. Tell them I was just scared. You know I loved him. You know I didn't mean it." I held her gaze, but I said nothing. Not a word. Silence was my final answer, and it weighed heavier than any accusation I could have spoken. Ruiz nodded to the officers. "Take her." They led Elise away, her cries echoing down the corridor, growing fainter with every step. Nurses and patients turned their heads, but no one stopped her. No one defended her. When the hallway was quiet again, Ruiz turned to me. "I know this doesn't erase the pain, but it's a start." I let out a slow breath, realizing I had been holding it. "Yes," I whispered. "It's a start." Inside Matthew's room, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor continued, a reminder of the real fight still ahead. But at least now, the shadow that had haunted us both was being dragged into the light. That night, the hospital grew impossibly quiet. The usual shuffle of nurses faded into hushed footsteps. Even the machines seemed softer, as though the ICU itself was holding its breath. I sat alone in Matthew's room, the dim light from the monitor painting his face in pale shadows. I pulled my handbag into my lap and retrieved the small leather notebook I carried for years. Robert used to tease me about it, said I was the only woman who would rather write her heart out on paper than speak it aloud. Tonight, that instinct felt like survival. I opened to a blank page, uncapped my pen, and began to write a letter my son would never see. "Matthew," I wrote, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to say this somewhere. They tell me silence is healing, but silence has become too heavy tonight." My hand trembled as I went on. "I came back early, thinking I would surprise you with a silk tie from Florence. I imagined you laughing, saying you already had too many, but I wanted you to wear one that carried the memory of me wandering cobblestone streets, picking out something just for you. Now it sits in my bag, untouched. The tie became a symbol of everything I missed while you lay here fighting alone. I paused, staring at him, tubes threaded into his body, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a machine. My boy, once so full of restless energy, now still. I whispered aloud what I had just written. The tie was supposed to be a gift. Instead, it became a reminder of absence, of how time is never ours to waste. I turned back to the page, the words rushing now. I could spend the rest of my days wishing Elise had been different, wishing she had stayed, had chosen presence over luxury, had loved you with even half the devotion you gave her. But I cannot change what she is, and I will not let her betrayal consume what we still have. Tears blurred the ink, but I kept writing. Victory is not watching her lose everything. That is too small, too empty. Real victory, my son, is you breathing. One more breath, then another. Real victory is me sitting here, your hand in mine, refusing to abandon you as others did. Real victory is not Elise's downfall. It is your survival. I looked at him again, his eyelids closed, lashes brushing cheeks that were once ruddy with life. Do you remember, Matthew? I whispered. When you took your first steps in our living room? You stumbled toward me, legs shaking, face determined. I knelt on the rug with my arms wide open, promising silently that no matter how many times you fell, I would be there to catch you. Tonight, you are stumbling again, but not with tiny legs. You are stumbling between life and death. And once more, I am here, arms open, ready to catch you however I can. The room grew thick with memory. I could almost smell the faint trace of baby powder, hear the squeak of his small shoes on hardwood. I clutched his hand gently, whispering, I caught you then. I will catch you now. The pen slipped from my fingers, and I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into the inner pocket of my bag. Another unsent letter, another secret truth. Like the tie, it would remain an anchor, something to remind me that love was never wasted, even when unreturned. Leaning close to him, I pressed my forehead against his hand. Matthew, I breathed, you are my victory, not Elise's ruin. You, one breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time. That is all I need. The monitor beeped steadily, answering in its mechanical language. I stayed there, letting the silence envelop me, not as emptiness, but as witness. Silence can be cruel, but it can also be sacred. That night in the stillness of the ICU, I discovered the difference. Before closing my eyes in the stiff hospital chair, I reached once more for the silk tie in my bag. I unwrapped it gently and draped it over the back of Matthew's bed, letting the fabric catch the dim light. When you wake, I whispered, this will be waiting. Not as a gift, but as proof I never left again. I folded my arms on the side of his bed and laid my head down, the tie shimmering faintly in the glow. Victory was not measured in courtroom battles or frozen accounts. Victory was measured here, in this fragile room, where love remained even when everything else had been stripped away. The vibration of my phone startled me in the silence of Matthew's room. I had drifted half asleep in the chair, my head still heavy from writing that letter I would never send. The screen lit up, its harsh glow cutting through the dimness of the ICU. It was a text message from Elise. For a moment, I just stared at her name, hovering there like a ghost I had tried to banish. Against every instinct, I opened it. Her words were simple, but they sliced clean through me. He will hate you forever. No greeting, no explanation, no apology. Just venom condensed into 7 words. I sat there, staring at the message until the letters blurred. My heart should have raced with anger, but instead, I felt something quieter, heavier. It was as though her words were a final attempt to claw her way into this room, even as the law closed in around her. A last weapon, not of money or lies, but of doubt. I looked up from the phone to Matthew. His chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm, each breath shallow but steady. His skin still carried the pallor of injury, but his fingers twitched faintly in mine, reminding me there was a life, fragile yet present. My voice cracked as I spoke into the stillness. Hate me if you must, Matthew. Blame me for being gone when you needed me. Resent me for the choices I made, for trusting Elise, for not seeing through her sooner. But hate or love, anger or forgiveness, none of that changes this one truth. I am here, and I am not leaving you again. The phone buzzed once more, another notification from Elise, but I refused to look. Instead, I powered the screen dark and set it face down on the side table, as if sealing her words out of this sacred space. Elise could scream into the void of her own making. I would not carry her poison any longer. I smoothed the edge of Matthew's blanket and let my hand rest lightly against his arm. The hiss of oxygen filled the pause, a strange comfort in its consistency. Do you know, son, I whispered, when you were little, you used to cling to me after nightmares. You'd shake and cry and swear the shadows were real. And I'd tell you something I believe even more fiercely now. Shadows can frighten, but they cannot harm if the light is near. Right now, Elise thinks her shadow will follow you, that her words will stain how you see me. But look at me, Matthew. Even if your eyes are closed, look at me with whatever part of you still listens. I am the light, and I will not dim. Tears burned, but I didn't let them fall. I wanted my voice steady, my hand unwavering. I bent closer, pressing my lips gently to his temple, careful of the bandages. Your wife may want you to hate me, but hate is cheap. Life is too costly to waste on it. What matters, Matthew, is that you breathe, that you heal, that when you open your eyes, you know you were never abandoned, not by me. In the corner of my eye, I caught the silk tie draped across the bed's railing, catching a faint shimmer from the monitor's glow. That small anchor steadied me. It reminded me that I had already chosen what kind of victory mattered. Not Elise's ruin, not her curses, but this, being here when it mattered most. I leaned back in the chair, my fingers still locked with Matthew's. Elise's words echoed faintly in my head, but they no longer had weight. They were just noise outside the glass of this room, powerless against the vow I had made. Hate or love, I whispered again into the quiet. You are my son, and I am here. The machines answered with their steady hum, as if agreeing. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm carry me, no longer shaken by Elise's final message. I had lost all sense of time in that room. Days bled into nights, marked only by the shift changes of nurses and the steady pulse of machines. I had learned the rhythm of Matthew's monitors as if they were hymns. Each beep was both a burden and a blessing, proof that he was still here. That morning, light slanted through the blinds in thin gold stripes, painting his pale face with faint warmth. I held his hand the way I always did, my thumb brushing against his knuckles, whispering small things just to fill the silence. Stories of his childhood, reminders of the world waiting beyond the hospital walls. The garden is starting to bloom, Matthew. Your father would have teased me for planting too early again. Then, something changed. It was so small at first, I thought I imagined it. The faintest squeeze of his fingers against mine. I froze, holding my breath, afraid any movement might break the fragile thread between us. His eyelids flickered once, twice, then slowly began to lift. I leaned forward, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Matthew, I whispered, afraid to believe, yet desperate to hope. His eyes opened, hazy and heavy, but unmistakably alive. He blinked against the light, confusion clouding his gaze, and then his lips parted. A sound emerged, ragged and broken, yet clear enough to pierce straight through me. Mom? The world stopped. That one word carried every sleepless night, every silent prayer, every ounce of fear and love I had poured into this vigil. My throat tightened as tears rushed hot and unstoppable down my face. I bent closer, pressing my forehead gently against his. I'm here, sweetheart. I've been here all along. The machines hummed, the monitors beeped, but in that moment, everything else disappeared. It was only us, mother and son, reunited in the fragile space between survival and despair. His gaze shifted weakly, searching my face, as though needing to confirm I was real. You rest now, I whispered, my voice trembling. There's nothing you need to do but breathe. I'll carry the rest for you. The slow motion of time wrapped around us, stretching every second into eternity. My tears soaked into the bedsheet where our hands met, but I did not wipe them away. They were not shameful. They were sacred. Matthew's eyelids fluttered again, exhaustion pulling him back under, but the word remained, echoing in my chest. Mom. Proof that he still knew me, still needed me. Proof that love had anchored him when everything else tried to drag him away. As he drifted back into sleep, I whispered into his ear, steady and sure, you came back to me, and I will never let you feel alone again. The first time I watched Matthew in physical, Medicare-covered physical therapy sessions, my heart ached with a mix of pride and sorrow. He gripped the parallel bars, his legs trembling beneath him, each step an act of defiance against the wreckage of his body. His jaw was set, determination etched into his face, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes, the fear of falling. The therapist counted softly, steadying him, yet my mind carried me backward in time. I saw him as a toddler, barely 18 months old, in our old living room with its worn beige carpet. He had taken those same shaky steps, arms reaching out, his face lit by wonder. Back then, I had crouched just a few feet away, my arms wide open, promising him he would not fall alone. Now, decades later, I stood just as close, my hands hovering over his back, resisting the urge to catch him too soon. The sound of his uneven breaths mirrored the little gasps of that small boy who once wore a striped onesie and carried a stuffed bear everywhere he went. The parallel was almost unbearable. Again, Matthew whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. He dragged his foot forward, body swaying. The therapist adjusted his stance, but it was his own grit that carried him. My throat tightened. I saw both versions of him at once. The little boy stumbling toward me and the grown man, broken yet unyielding, fighting his way back from the edge of death. I realized then that nothing had truly changed. The roles were the same. He still walked toward me, and I still stood ready to hold him. Time had drawn a circle around us, binding the past and present in one fragile, powerful moment. As he reached the end of the bars, his chest heaving, he looked at me. His lips curved, weak but certain. "I'm not giving up, Mom." My vision blurred. I whispered back the same words I had spoken when he was only a child taking his first steps. "I know you're not. And I'll be right here, every time you stumble, until you find your stride again." The porch was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that settles not as emptiness, but as peace. Matthew sat beside me, his cane resting against the railing. On the small wooden table between us sat 2 cups of tea, steam curling into the cool air, and the silk tie from Florence folded neatly, its colors catching the late sunlight. That tie had traveled across oceans, survived heartbreak, and now lay here, not as a gift forgotten, but as a witness to everything we had endured. I watched my son take a sip of tea, his hand still trembling slightly, but steady enough to lift the cup without help. His eyes wandered toward the garden, where the roses I had planted years ago bloomed defiantly, as if reminding us that beauty survives storms. "Mom," he said softly, "do you ever think we made it through all this by luck?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of my answer. Not luck, persistence, grace, and refusing to let go when everything tried to pull us apart. He looked at me then, with the same expression he had worn as a child reaching for my hand, trust mixed with hope. And in that gaze, I found the words that had been resting in my chest for weeks. "Victory," I whispered, my fingers brushing the silk tie, "is not making Elise pay. Victory is watching my son stand again, even if it is just one step, and knowing I never let go of you." Matthew's hand tightened around mine. Then, slowly, he pushed himself up with the cane, testing his balance. His movements were uncertain, but he walked forward, step by step, until he stood at the edge of the porch. The light broke through the branches above, scattering gold across his shoulders, as if the world itself blessed his return. I closed my eyes, letting the silence hold us, the moment whole and unbroken. For the first time in a long while, I felt the circle close, not with bitterness, but with healing. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read every one with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and we will see you in the next story.